where, so.
As long as the voter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, Pete, a number of people asked if this would be recorded so they can see it later, so it will be. But as I say, as long as the voters have the actual wording of the motions in front of them, we can dispense with reading them and you will be using a shorthand reference to that motions booklet. For tonight, the intent of this meeting is not to debate the warrant articles. We have plenty of opportunity to debate the warrant articles at town meeting, and I've done this for a number of years where we go through the warrant article by article, and those individuals who would like to ask questions, this gives the select board, the town administrator, department heads, other people who are proponents and proposing certain articles an opportunity to hear the kind of questions that are likely to be asked at town meeting. And obviously, if you can answer the question briefly tonight, that would be ideal. But if you don't have an answer prepared tonight, this would give you a heads up so that that same question is likely to be answered. I'm sorry, to be asked at town meeting. So this gives all the participants in town meeting kind of an advanced look at what some of the questions are likely to be, what some of the issues are likely to be, so that you can come to town meeting prepared to answer the voters' questions. So that's the intent for tonight. I'm going to ask you not to debate the articles and not to stake a position on one side of the article or another. But to use this as an informational session from both sides. So I do want to introduce our new town administrator, who's been on the job, about 4 days at this point, or 3 days, I think. Rich
3
Wallner.
days. Working on 3 days here.
Very good. Welcome. And say thank you to Charlie Sumner, who's our outgoing interim town administrator. Mr. Sumner will be at town meeting as he was intimately involved with the preparation of the warrant and the budget this year. So it's going to be kind of a tag team effort. Tonight, I'll probably be a little less formal if I call on you by first name. Please don't be offended. At town meeting, we'll be a bit more formal and use last names only. So if you're ready to begin, the first article in the warrant, as per our charter, is the operating budget. I'm just going to give Mr. Sumner, Charlie, an opportunity to very briefly explain where we're at with that budget, and then open for any questions. Charlie?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So Article number 1 is a budget that essentially creates a funding mechanism to maintain the level of services that you had in the current fiscal year 2022, and maintain that same level of service going forward into fiscal 23. So really no new programs, no new positions to speak of. And we just really were trying to sort of stabilize municipal operations. Now, obviously, the issue with the annual town budget is that it does create a situation where we're going to ask the voters under ballot question number 1 on the annual town election on June 21st for an override in the amount of $518,820. So I would say to you that, the town has been passing budgets in the past that have used a lot of one-time revenue sources to fund the operating budget. And, I would say that during COVID, I understand that there was probably a hesitation to ask voters for additional spending capacity, but really we're in a situation now where there are no reserves, is no capacity. And the only alternative, if we want to maintain a level of services that you've, received in the past, is to ask voters for additional funding capacity under a Proposition 2.5 override. And the only other thing that, Mr. Moderator, that I would add is that the cost of this particular override on a medium home value of $619,000 would be approximately $115.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Other questions on the budget? I don't see any raised hands at the moment. I think once again, for those who may have come in late, on Monday night, June 6th, there'll be a deeper dive into the budget itself as opposed to the warrant as a whole. That will be, I believe that's a regular posted select board meeting. And the forum is asked if I'd host it. I'm sorry, no, I'm incorrect. It's a forum meeting, right? So it'll be a forum meeting. It'll be a virtual meeting. I'm sorry, a hybrid meeting on June 6th. And so that'll be an opportunity for a deeper dive into the budget itself and the override. Other questions about Article 1, the operating budget?
Again, for those who came in late, to ask a question, go to reactions and raise your hand, and we will try to call you in the order in which your hand was raised. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on briefly to Article 2. And Charlie, if you could give an explanation of why we're seeing 2 budget articles here.
Yes, thank you very much. So Article number 2 is if town meeting were not to pass, approve the budget that we're presenting under Article number 1, Article number 2 is a budget that reduce spending by the amount of the override. So it's really, we're obviously asking you to consider adopting budget number 1. But if that were to fail, then all budget number 2 would be reduced by approximately $500,000. There are, significant cuts in departmental budgets under Article number 2 that I suspect will go into more detail on Monday next. But needless to say, a $500,000 cut in spending will reduce services to the community.
Okay, I see Cynthia Franklin in the chat said that she doesn't have a hand raising option on her screen. I think in some systems, maybe on an iPad, it might be somewhere else. But Dick, could you?
Well, then if you'd like to take Sylvia, please
sorry.
go ahead. She has to unmute herself.
Okay, Cynthia, you have to unmute yourself to ask your question. Cynthia Franklin.
Okay, I had put it in the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just looking before town meeting for someone to provide some sort of list or explanation of the changes between the 2 budgets, as opposed to having to just go through the warrant and say, okay, they cut X amount of money out of this line item and X amount of money out of another line item, but there's no explanation as to what those cuts represent. And that would be very useful to have before town meeting, please.
Okay, Charlie, I think this is something that administration has been working on. Charlie, would you explain the format that we're going to use?
Yeah, thank you. So we are, as the moderator had indicated earlier, we are tomorrow going to finalize the motions booklet that will be available at town meeting, but we'll also post that on the website by the end of business tomorrow. And in the motion booklet, there's going to be an attachment we're referring to as Appendix A, and that will show those budget line items in the cost in the budget reductions in those particular line items. And then also staff is working to finalize a summary sheet that'll talk about the impacts of those particular budget cuts as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Mo has raised his hand, or Yvonne. Could you?
Thank you. Thank you. It was my understanding, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on this, it's not either or budget number one or budget number two that we're being asked to vote on. If I understand it, if article number one fails at the polls, we want to be able to adopt article
Number two.
number two. So I just to be clear, you can vote for both. Charlie, tell me if I'm wrong. And again, if article number one fails at the polls, it still allows the issues in article two to go forward. Do I have that right?
Charlie, do you want me to answer that, or would you want to?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay.
Moderator.
Mo,
And if you make a mistake, I'll correct you.
that would be great. Mo, you are correct. When the warrant was written, and you know, this one had to go out in time to go to all the voters, based on the recommendation of the Department of Revenue, two budgets were created because the Department of Revenue said exactly what you said, that if even if Article 1 was passed at the town meeting, but it was turned down at the polls, we don't have time to do another town meeting, so that we needed a backup budget that we could go into the new fiscal year. Since the warrant went to press, and since we've had the opportunity to review with town council the format for the motions, what you're going to see is a motion on Article 1, which makes the amount of the override that's being proposed contingent on the ballot vote. So that one article, if it's passed and the override passes, will basically put into effect the budget with the override amount. If that budget passes but the override fails, the contingent language will ensure that we can go forward with the budget numbers that would be essentially the equivalent of what's in Article 2. So the way it's been crafted now is Article 1 will include contingent language, so that if Article 1 passes, we don't actually need to vote on Article 2. We have basically built the backup into the language of the motion for Article 1. Have I got that right, Charlie?
So much better than I could have explained it.
I'm
And
not
I,
sure.
and I will just, the only thing I'll add, Mr. Moderator, is this literally evolved on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. And we've had a series of meetings with staff, and the moderator, with town council, working on motions, so it gets a little complicated.
Yeah, just for those who may not be sort of intimately familiar with the timing and the mechanisms here, it's not uncommon for towns to have overrides, and there's a concern about what happens if the override doesn't pass. And if we had had our town meeting in April, when we normally did, and an override was not successful, there would be the opportunity to schedule another town meeting with a budget that was under the limits of Prop 2.5. Because our town meeting is so late, we don't have the chance to schedule. There's not enough time to schedule another town meeting. So that's why we have to engage this process, because if we went into the fiscal year without a budget, you're basically talking about a government shutdown at this point. The town has to have a budget of some sort to begin the new fiscal year, or essentially all town services would shut down. And I don't think that's a situation that anyone wants. It looks like, I'm sorry,
Helen,
Helen
you
had her hand up. I don't know if this.
Ellen, you have a question?
Yeah, the last thing Danny said, I was going to say, let's go at it from another direction. If both Article 1 and the contingency article failed, and it failed at the ballot, we wouldn't have any money to pay for anything. So Danny already said that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Helen.
Roland, you had your hand up?
Yes, I noticed that the select board voted 5-0 not to recommend Article 2. Could somebody address the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, well, my reasoning, if I may.
Sure.
Please, Emily.
My reasoning was simply, we prefer, or I preferred when I voted for it, option one. That's the reason it wasn't, as Mo's question highlighted the fact that we need to emphasize, it's not, you can pick this or you can pick that. The contingency article, option two, is just in case, it's in case of emergency, let's put it that way, but it's not preferred. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, so my reasoning for voting to not recommend was I do not want to endorse that contingency plan. I think it would have a devastating impact on town services, staff morale, and it would actually hinder us going forward in the future as far as our finances in the future, because the problem doesn't go away if we don't pass the override. They just get pushed into next year and recovering from these types of cuts.
All right, let's Mike, let's try not to get too far into advocacy.
Sure, asked why we didn't recommend, so that's the answer to the question. I mean,
I think that's a fair answer. Yes, trying to think, yes, Manny, you have your, I see you're waving your hand, but you, could you unmute Manny Smith, please?
Manny has to unmute
Okay,
himself.
Manny, could you unmute yourself?
Sure, I just said, I hate to go back to Article 1, but I have a couple of quick questions about the budget. First of all, in line item 174, I'd like to know what the planning board does with $8,000. I'd like to know what is projected for consulting expenses of $50,000 in line 196. And then going all the way back to, I think it's the first article, the first item on the, under general government, why is our excellent and incredible moderator getting only $225? But
Thank you, Manny, but we're going to leave that one alone. Can somebody answer Manny's question on the other one? Let me just say, Manny, there are people who do a phenomenal amount of work on boards and committees in this town that don't get paid a cent. So I'm quite happy with $225. Thank you very much. Could somebody answer Manny's question? Ryan, perhaps?
Yeah, so the planning board, that includes their requirements to hold hearings. So that includes their advertising budget, as well as any posted or postings, mail letters that have to go out or anything of that nature. In terms of the consultancy budget, that is, I believe you're referring to the one under the town administrators, correct?
no, item 196, the final item. Well,
Okay.
on page 11, 50,000.
Charlie, which one is 196?
Yeah, 196 is referred to as consulting expense. And the reason for the increase from $20,000 to $40,000 is
50.
to $50,000, I'm sorry. The reason for that increase is we've recently hired a new town accountant, and we've hired a new town treasurer. And I wanted to keep some money available to retain the services of Lisa Sauvé and Mary McIsaac. These two women are along, like me, retirees that have stepped in to assist the town over the past year, repair your financial management systems. And I want to, use their services to assist these new staff members as they close out fiscal year 22, open up fiscal year 23, finish the work with the auditors for fiscal 21 and 22, and then provide some training for about 6 months, just to make sure that all of the work that we've done is incorporated as they transition to take over financial operations for the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Manny. Jan Marcy, or is that?
Yes, thank you, Dan. Just with all due respect to Ryan, there must be something else included in the planning board's budget. I'm not saying it's something that shouldn't be there, but the zoning board of appeals is only getting $300, and we have at least as many public hearings, if not more. I'm sure we have more public hearings than the planning board. So I think there's something else in there. It may have to do with recodification, but there's something else going on, I think, there with the planning board. And I'm not sure how the zoning board's going to deal with $300, but not my job. Thank you.
Well, perhaps this is something that somebody could research a little bit and be prepared to come to town meeting. If there's no one that has an answer for that immediately tonight, that's something that maybe needs to be answered at town meeting. I don't know if there's anybody from the planning board on. I think Bonnie Shepherd, I believe, is on the planning board, if I got that right. I'm not sure. But in any case, rather than, if there is somebody that has an immediate answer to that, great. If not, please try to come to town meeting prepared with an answer.
Bonnie, do you want to answer that?
I just wanted to say that I cannot answer it. I have no idea why it went from 300 to 8,000. And so if Jerry Parent is not on the call, he's the one who will have to answer that.
Do you think they need to pay for?
Okay, Jan, did you have anything else you wanted to ask about?
I think she might have just forgotten to put her hand back down.
Okay.
Yep, there we go. Okay. I think we're all going to be.
Actually,
really
wait, John has a question, Dan.
Okay,
Sorry,
sorry,
about
John.
something else.
John Marcy.
You explained the voting pattern that you want at town meeting for Articles 1 and 2. What about at town election? Are we going to be asked to vote in a positive fashion for both of those articles in the election?
No, the only article, the only question on town meeting, I'm sorry, on the ballot with regards to the budget is the override, which will be included in the wording of the motion under Article 1. Is that clear? Okay, well,
If the town election, if it fails at
okay. Yeah, again, let me, once again, the way the motion on Article 1 will be made at town meeting is it will include the language related to the contingency that's subject to the override. So if the Article 1 passes at town meeting and question 1 passes at the ballot, we have the budget under Article 1 with all of the money that's subject to an override. If Article 1 passes at town meeting, but the override votes fails, we still have the reduced budget absent that 518,000 and change that's subject to the override. And I hope that's clear.
But it still would have to, that contingency would still have to be voted for at town election.
That's correct. Yes. Yes. the
and
contingency-
if it fails at town election, what happens?
No, the contingency actually does not require a Proposition 2.5 override. So the contingency budget itself will not be on the ballot for the special town election. So on the ballot is the question 1 with what we're requesting for the operating override, and the contingency budget is basically the budget that does not require a Proposition 2.5 override and would not require a positive vote at the special town election to approve it.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Elaine McElroy?
Yeah, I just want to maybe clarify a little further. Will we be asked to vote on Article 2, or is that not necessary?
The voters will only be asked to vote on Article 2 if Article 1 fails.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There may be, there's a little bit of confusion perhaps because of the way the Article 2 was titled where it's referred to as a contingency budget plan. I think that given that we're saying that Article 1 in total is contingent on a Prop 2.5 override, the use of the word contingency in Article 2 is a little bit confusing, but the Article 2 is a standalone article that does not require an override vote, but does result in a $518,000 reduction in expenditures as compared with Article 1, and so, which is subject to the override vote. It's not the most elegant way to do this, but given what we knew when the warrant was being prepared, this was what was recommended by the Department of Revenue, and I'm hoping that we can make it a little more clear between Monday night and town meeting, so people are clear on what they're voting on. Are there any other questions on Article 1 or Article 2, Helen? Could you unmute yourself?
Helen,
Helen?
you need to unmute.
Sorry. Revealing my ignorance, which is pretty strange at this point. So if we pass Article 1 at town meeting, and then it goes to the ballot, and it doesn't pass there, doesn't pass, okay? But don't we have to therefore vote for the contingency article favorably at town meeting?
No, because the motion is going to be a little bit different than the language that you see in Article 1. The motion is
That's
going to
good. Thank you.
Okay. Charlie, can you make it any clearer than I'm trying to?
Well, I think you're doing a better job than I could have. The only thing I'll say is, as things developed, when we originally talked to the Department of Revenue for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they insisted on 2 separate articles on town meeting floor. When we sat down to review all the motions with a team, with our town council had an alternative solution that appeared to make more sense. And so that's why it's changed. But anyway, the motion that you will see in the motion booklet is going to provide language that creates a situation where we don't need a secondary vote on Article number 2.
Thank you.
Jude,
Jude,
can you unmute? Oh, you've unmuted.
Ryan, or Danny, thanks. What will the motion read exactly? Do you have that language?
I don't have that language now, but Charlie said that it will be, I think he's going to finalize that motions booklet. He and Rebecca will be finalizing that motions booklet tomorrow. It will be posted to the town website in advance of town meeting, so it'll be available there. I'm sorry, but we don't have that. The booklet is not complete now.
So we'll have it later this week or Monday?
I think by end of business tomorrow, Charlie, is that the goal? Yeah.
Yes, I do have a copy of the motion, but it's very long. And I don't think it's going to be advantageous for me to read that tonight.
No.
But I am going to finalize that by noon because I need to send it to the printer. And then we will put it on the website by the end of the business day tomorrow.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Jude?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, are there any other questions about Article 1 and Article 2 in the budget as a whole? All right, if not, Article 3 are budgetary transfers. This is something that we do most years. These are not any new expenditures, but they're moving monies between different town accounts. There are probably a few more of them than there are in other years, but this is a reflection of some of the bookkeeping issues. And maybe even more than that, a reflection of the fact that the warrant last year was prepared by people who have less than the expertise in preparing the warrant than maybe should have been the case. Which is not any knock on them. That the warrant last year was prepared in a kind of a last minute fashion. So Charlie, do you want any further comments on that?
I would just say that, clearly, the situations on the ground last year didn't allow for the, proper vetting and development of a budget that reflected the needs of the town for FY '22. I would, so therefore, this is, unusually large compared to the past. I would say that if you look at the left-hand column where the money is being transferred from, one of the nice things that did occur last year is that we did appropriate extra money for Nauset Regional District expenses and the county assessment expenses. So we actually have some money in the current fiscal year budget that can be utilized to satisfy these shortfalls.
Right. I think the important thing for people to know is that this is not any new expenditure or new, anything new on the tax burden. Any other questions?
Cynthia Franklin?
Cynthia, do you have a question?
I did, but Charlie just answered it, so thank you. I couldn't figure out the county assessment thing and how that was available as money, but that's good.
Great, thank you. Any other questions about the Article 3, the budget transfers? Not prior year invoices. Again, something that we do from time to time. I think in much the same way, there are probably a few more of these than would normally be the case, but these are things that the town has already committed to. We have to pay our bills. So any questions on those? Just one thing to take note of. This does require a 4/5 vote at town meeting, and unlike the articles which require 2/3, if we don't have a unanimous vote on this, I will have to count the votes on this one. So I'll just put that out there now. The capital budget, Charlie, why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we have a series of articles that, as you can see, total $1,268,000 that deals with 8 different departments. And, one of the things that I had hoped to have completed by the June 11th town meeting is to have closed the books and have the audit done and certified free cash. The reality is, I wasn't able to accomplish that. So I won't have free cash certified on Saturday, June 11th. So the items that are listed under if you go to section number 6, DPW, item D, which is the bandstand awning for $50,000. Item E, which is the water refill station for $20,000. And item H, which is the Briar Lane culvert replacement for $75,000. Those will be deleted from the article when you hear the motion, because I wasn't able to get free cash certified. All of the other items that identify these as raise and appropriate. So when you look at that right-hand column where you see raise and appropriate, those are all going to be subject to an override under ballot question number 2 on June 21st, 2022. The items that you see as transfers, those are either special funds that actually have money, like the beach fund or the shellfish fund, or we've found some old appropriations that are either their purpose has been completed and there's a surplus, or the money was never spent and won't be spent. So we repurpose those monies to pay for some critical items that are in the warrant. So I think I'll stop there and I'll answer any questions that people might have.
Okay, and can you raise your hand? Use the raise hand if you know how to, because I can't see all 50 some odd people at once. Amy Carew.
Hi. Hi. So I was just wondering,
Amy, we lost you.
yeah, I'm here. I'm trying to think about what I was wondering.
Been there, done
When
that.
do you expect the free cash to be certified? That was the question.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that.
Yeah.
So I would say to you that we made a major presentation on at a select board meeting on Tuesday night about the status of our project. We will be closing out the books for fiscal 20 and 21 within the next week to 10 days. So that's the first step. And then once that happens, there's a series of documents that we need to provide to the Department of Revenue. So we'll be able to do that very quickly after we close out the books. The Department of Revenue has been, working with us hand in glove throughout this elongated process, and they're going to give Wellfleet priority. And so they'll focus on certifying free cash, but we need to get the audit done for fiscal 21. We've been in communications with our auditors, and once we close the books, they will come in. They're sensitive to our dilemma. Their audit will take about 3 weeks, and then we can apply to the Department of Revenue. So I would say that, free cash certification, I think if we thought about the time frame, the end of July might be a reasonable time frame.
And then what happens? Can we use that money then, or do we have to wait till next year?
Yeah, so once all of these steps occur, you won't be able to use free cash until you have one, it's certified, but two, that you have another town meeting.
No.
No appropriation can be made without approval from town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jan, you have a question, or John?
Quick question. I hope this isn't an ignorant one. Is Article 5 just a yes or no vote, or can each of these items, number 1, 2, 3, et cetera, A, B, C, voted on separately, or it's just one and done? You vote Article 5 up or down?
It's the capital budget is being done as an entire budget, not as a piecemeal laundry list.
Okay, thank you.
Bonnie Shepherd?
Yeah, I listened to part of the select board meeting on Tuesday, and the Mr. Sumner's description of the capital budget was that it would eliminate the practice that has happened in previous years where we have to approve overrides for each new ambulance or new piece of equipment. And so, which means to me that there's some kind of depreciation system going to happen so that we never have to do that again. And we don't have to borrow money for these things. So I guess I don't quite understand how this capital budget will help us save, like if there's a 7-year life on a police cruiser, how will this capital budget enable the town to save 1/7 of the cost of the new cruiser for each of the following years?
Charlie, do you want to handle that, or should Ryan?
I'll give it a shot, I guess. So as I indicated, a number of articles, a number of requests within the capital article are raise and appropriate articles. And then sprinkled throughout the balance of the warrant, there are several other articles that are raised and appropriate. They're all going to be subject to an override of Proposition 2.5 under question number 2. And so that override, question number 2, is in the amount of $672,700. And what I was talking about last week and a little bit more tonight is you've had a practice on the last several years where you'd ask if you were going to buy a truck or a police cruiser or fix a building, do any of these things, you would have a debt exclusion question, individual debt exclusion question on the ballot. And you were borrowing for these projects for 3 to 5 years. And I would just say that that's unusual in the Commonwealth. It's not common. And so what we're trying to do here is ask the voters to approve an override in that $672,700. It would fund all of the raise and appropriate articles on this warrant. It's a permanent increase in the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. And so next year, you're going to have another truck to replace, or another cruiser to replace, or another roof to replace, or windows in a building. But you'll have an allocation of funds that the select board by policy will reserve for equipment replacement and facility repairs going forward. So the reality is you have been borrowing for all of these items in the past. And in a way, it's worked out okay, right? Because interest rates have been historically low. I don't believe that's going to continue going forward. So this is creating a situation where you'll have money to pay for all of these items this year in fiscal 23. And then you'll have an allowance in 23 and 24 and 25. You'll have a sum of money to buy and replace other, equipment and facility repairs for the town. So I just think it will put you in a place, and I've sort of talked about in the past that the financial underfootings, the foundation of town operations have been destabilized by some of these practices. And I know it's a lot to ask, but if voters would consider passing question number 1 and question number 2, I think that it'll repair that structural defect in the financing of municipal operation on an annual basis and put you in a good place. You do have a multi-year capital plan that's reasonably robust and in pretty good shape. So I think going forward, if the town were to approve these, you won't have the uncertainty that you've had in the past.
Thank
Let
you.
me-
Ryan, we're next.
Let me just add one thing to what Charlie said, is that voters should understand that approving the override does not create a pot of money which administration has to spend on capital projects as they see fit. It puts some headroom into the budget, and ideally we'd create a capital stabilization fund at some point in the future, and that money would be there to be used. But administration still needs to come to town meeting to ask for approval for any capital expenditures going forward. It's not as though we're voting a pot of money which is available to be used without future approvals of town meeting. Ryan or Helen, I think.
Ryan,
Ryan was
you
first.
next.
Yeah, so there's two things. The first is that we are having a special town meeting in September. So it's September, is it the 11th or the 10th? I can never.
10th.
The September 10th. As long as free cash is certified before then, that could be utilized at that special town meeting. So we don't have to wait for an annual town meeting before free cash might be able to be utilized by the voters. And the other is just because, so Wellfleet currently doesn't have a capital budget. We have a capital improvement plan, and what we're proposing is basically establishing a capital budget. That does not mean that it will fund every single capital item going forward. There are also some large unexpected expenses. We have a couple on the warrant this year. One is the school fire suppression system for 2.2 million. You know, so there will be times where the capital, that the appropriation we're asking for to establish a capital budget is not going to be sufficient to meet the capital requests of the town. So I just want that to be clear to the voters as well. So thank you.
Helen, you had your hand raised?
Yes, I just got a quick answer from Jerry Parent about the mysterious 8,000.
You dropped out, Helen. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry, that was me.
Yeah, I had unmuted myself. I just got a quick answer back from Jerry Parent about the mysterious $8,000. Can I read it to you? It's one sentence. He says, money was taken out of our budget last year to help with town cash flow. So some of that was probably returned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Any other questions on the capital budget? Okay, I don't see any hands up. I don't see anything in the chat.
Again, if you would like to raise your hand under reactions on the bottom, click on that and you get a raise hand button. That applies to anyone on a PC. May not apply to other devices. So does anyone else have a question? If not, if you do, try, if you can't do a raise a hand, try the chat.
Okay, I don't see anything in the,
Yes, Amy.
Yes. So thank you. So what happens if Article 5 gets voted down?
Charlie?
So if Article 5 were to be defeated, none of these projects would be done and none of this equipment would be funded. And it would certainly create hardship on a number of fronts.
Even the ones that are transfers from other accounts, or only the raise and appropriate ones?
Well, I think you asked me if the article was defeated in its entirety.
Right.
Now, I'll let them, I think the moderator would be better served to speak on this, but there could, I suspect, Mr. Moderator, there could be amendments on town meeting floor to reduce certain items.
There could be.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mike, you had a question?
Just a comment pertaining to that question, just factual, that if that were to be voted down, the capital budget, those issues that need to be funded would still need to be funded in a future town meeting. That wouldn't go away.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the capital budget, Article 5? Okay, Article 6 and Article 7 are our two enterprise budgets. I think maybe a quick explanation of how the enterprise budgets work, Charlie, and what we do with them.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the Marina Enterprise Fund first. When you look at the warrant under page 35, the first page, there is the revenues that are produced at the Marina, relative in a number of different areas, and they're all listed in your warrant book. The second page on page 36 of the warrant book is the operating expenses. That's the personnel and operating expenses for the Marina itself. So there is a slight surplus of revenues from that operation, $11,850, and those would be retained for future marine related expenses. Once again, the Marina budget at the moment is self-sufficient, and revenues are slightly greater than operations. And largely the level of services remain unchanged from the current fiscal year.
Any questions on the Marina enterprise, Dick?
Yes, I have a question. I assume it's the fees for people who dock at the marina come in under dockage.
That's correct.
And we have a 20-year waiting list, as I understand it, to get a dock. Somehow I think it would be appropriate to raise fees 20% per year until such time as the waiting list drops to something reasonable like 1 year. Obviously, people are underpaying for dockage if there's a 20-year waiting list. I wonder if anyone could talk to why we have a 20-year waiting list to get a dock.
I don't see the harbor master on the call unless he's on one of these numbers that that doesn't show up. Is there somebody who wants to try to answer that Dick's question?
Well, Mike,
Yeah, I'll just say that I know that the harbor master is planning on looking into increasing fees. That's one of the things he's been talking about. So I think that issue will be coming up.
but I'm not addressing the fee as much as the fact that there's a 20-year waiting list, which should be addressed by raising fees, not the economic issue of getting more money.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm not prepared to answer why the waiting list is long. I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons, partly because it's a beautiful harbor, but it might not be pertinent to the town meeting vote. But I know that there's been conversation about increasing fees for dockage.
All right, I don't want to get too deep into a policy discussion here, if possible, but you know, perhaps that's a question, Dick, you can address directly to the harbor master and ask him about that. Rebecca?
Okay, Rebecca?
I can tell you, I know I'm not a resident of Wellfleet, but I'm a resident of Harwich, and we have our boat in Chatham, and there is also about a 15-year waiting list in Chatham. The reason is because there are more people who want to dock their boat than there are docks available. And the problem is that people that have the slips don't give up their dockage very easily. So the waiting list is happening because there are tons of people with their boats, and really at this point, as far as Chatham, the only way to get a dock is for someone to either give it up or pass away. So that's right now, there aren't as many docks available as there are people who would like a dock slip.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. It's an argument for a kayak, I think. So, all right.
Then you have to go into the kayak lottery, which is another story.
That's true. Thanks, Rebecca. Let's move on to the, if there are no other questions about the Marine Enterprise Fund, move on to the Article 7, the Water Enterprise Fund. Charlie, briefly.
Yep, thank you. Now, this is one area that I have, unlike the Marine, I've spent a little bit of time on. So once again, on page 38 of the warrant book, the top part of the article references the revenues, and the lower part references expenses. Now, I would say that I have worked really closely with the water commissioners this past winter. We did hire a water rate consultant to review the town's rate structure. And we've come up with a new proposal. The water commissioners, we've had 7 or 8 meetings on it, and the water commissioners are very close to holding a public hearing to adopt a new revenue plan. And largely the goal of the plan is to create a situation where the revenues from water operations pay for the personnel and the operating costs. And then, of course, the debt service that's been approved in the past is all been excluded from Proposition 2.5 by voters in the ballot. So those are subsidized by the town. And historically, the town the general fund has subsidized the operation of the water department. And that continues to be so, but you can see under the estimated revenues section where it says general fund transfer, that the subsidy by the town has decreased under this proposed budget. And it's largely because of the efforts of the water commissioner to look at a new water rate structure.
All right, thank you. Any questions about the water enterprise budget? Okay, I don't see any hands. I don't see anyone on the chat. All right, Articles 8, 9, 10, and 11 are all to settle or fund collective bargaining agreements with the town's various unions. And my understanding is that there will be the motions that are being made under each of these articles will have dollar amounts for those contracts which have been settled. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, but perhaps all but one of these will be going to town meeting with contracts ready to be funded. Is that correct?
Yes, so I would say that I can publicly state that we have reached an agreement with the Wellfleet Police Officers Union under Article number 8. So we'll have a proposal to present to the voters. And we've also reached an agreement with the Wellfleet Communication Union under Article number 10. This has been ratified by the unions in the select board. I have a sense of optimism that I'll have one and possibly two more ready for Saturday, June 11th.
All right, thank you. Questions on the union contracts? Article 12, I'm sorry, Mr. Sayer, Tim Sayer, can you unmute yourself, please?
I'm unmuted now. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Question on, in public safety, line item 210 in the general budget, you show an increase of $50,000 and you show an increase of about $27,000 in expenses. Do you anticipate that covering the new union agreement? Same goes for the fire department. Or do you think those numbers will go up even higher than what they are on this budget that's been printed? Thank you.
Thank you. So the articles that we'll present for article number 8 and 10 will request additional appropriations and sums of money relative to wage and other benefits that we're going to recommend in the contract settlement.
Thank you. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Is that Amy? Amy Carew? Amy, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. So
Okay.
if we don't have agreements, then on Article 9, 11, and 12, or the others, what happens? Do those still come up for a vote without a number?
No.
They
No,
just,
if there's not a settled contract with a dollar figure associated, those would be indefinitely postponed and would be dealt with at a future town meeting.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Article 12 is that's been in the warrant for quite a number of years. There was time historically when there were employees who were not covered by collective bargaining agreements or by personal contracts. at the moment, there is nobody that falls into that category. So Article 12 will be indefinitely postponed. All of the employees right now are either under a collective bargaining agreement or an individual contract with the town. So there's no need to take any action under Article 12. Article 13 is to fund our OPEB liability. And this is something that the town has worked diligently at over a number of years to begin to address our unfunded liability. And my understanding from Charlie is that we've done a pretty good job of this and are in better shape than a number of other towns. And I think as John Morrissey is on the call, I think I will give him credit for having brought this to the town's attention a number of years ago and got us working on this. Charlie, do you want to say anything about the OPEB?
Yeah, so the other post-employment benefit obligation that the town of Wellfleet has, for example, I'm a retiree of the town of Brewster, and I received my health care benefits through the town in retirement. Town pays a share of my, Medicare costs, and Wellfleet has a very similar plan. So you have ongoing obligations for retirees. The town of Wellfleet, I'll have the number at town meeting. I didn't bring it home with me, but I think you have over $2.7 million already appropriated in a reserve. Don't hold me to that number. I'll have the real balance at town meeting. So you've been putting the money away to fund this future obligation, and you've done I believe, a really solid job. Now, we didn't, because of the financial situation that the town experienced last year, I do not believe we appropriated any money into the OPEB trust fund. This article is similar to some of the items that I had mentioned under the capital plan. Is we don't have any levy capacity. So would like to get back into the position of appropriating $200,000 per year. This is included in ballot question number 2 that I had referenced earlier. We're asking for, under ballot question number 2, I'd mentioned $672,700. This is one of the numbers that's embedded in that sum of money. And once again, if we can get the override passed, we can reestablish the funding of this important obligation that you have. And by, a policy adoption, that we can make sure that those monies are reserved for future obligations. I don't know what the town of Wellfleet's total outstanding liability is, but I suspect it's in the range of $9 or $10 million. I'll try to find that out for Saturday as well.
Thank you. Dick?
Yes, I have a question. Besides past unfunded liabilities, are we current on all the liabilities for current employees? That is the total getting larger aside from the amount this $200,000? Are we funding it for current employees?
Yeah, through the moderator.
Yes.
So, once again, you have a current workforce, a workforce that's currently working for you that is, accruing benefits in the future when they become retirees for their, retirement under the Barnstable County Retirement District. And within the operating budget is an assessment from Barnstable County Retirement, and that includes future and projected ongoing costs. So the town of all of the communities on Cape Cod are participating in a plan to fund current costs and the outstanding liability. And I believe the last time I looked at Barnstable County's statements, we're at about 68% funding of that liability. And with the costs that we include in the budget in all of the communities on the Cape, I believe that liability, outstanding liability, is going to be paid off in 2038. So you're on a pathway towards addressing that liability within the operating budget, and I think we're in relatively good shape. You know, not perfect, but relative to many other systems across the country, Barnstable County and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have a decent plan.
Okay. Amy, you had a question?
I do. Okay, so you say that this 200,000 is embedded in the 672. Okay, that was in Article 5, which is the capital budget. Is that?
No, I'm sorry, I might have misstated. It's embedded in the ballot question number 2 on the override.
Oh, which we don't have here. We don't have the ballot question I see is
The
not. I
ballot
see.
is on page 68 of your
Okay.
warrant book.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to maybe expand on that a little bit. So the ballot question number 2, that override covers those items in question in Article 5, which are listed as raise and appropriate, and it also covers the amount under Article 13. And there may be one or two others, Charlie.
That's correct, and
yeah,
we can talk about that as we go along.
As we go. Okay. Other questions on Article 13? All right, thank you. Article 14, transfer to the stabilization fund. Is this one going to be indefinitely postponed?
Yes, yeah, this once again is a goal that I had if I had gotten free cash certified, and of course I don't. So this will, I believe that this will be included in the special town meeting in September.
This was the stabilization fund was used to this amount of money was taken out of the stabilization fund at our last annual town meeting in order to fund the budget and keep it within the limits of 2.5 at the 2021 annual town meeting. So the intent is to replenish that fund and put it back on a solid footing, but the feeling was to wait until free cash is certified in the fall or before the fall town meeting. Any other questions on that? So that one will be in all likelihood indefinitely postponed. Police department, new staff. Chief Hurley, would you like to address this briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. I'll just give a very quick brief overview and I guess kind of how we got here. Back in 2018, the previous chief, Ron Facette, started educating the select board, finance committee, and town meeting of the potential of basically the reserve officer program in the state kind of being eliminated or transitioned out. And that actually happened in December of 2020. Governor Baker signed a police reform bill, which began a 3-year phase out of the reserve officer program. And many of us in Wellfleet know them as the summer cops. I was one back in the mid-90s. A majority of your police department right now came from a summer cop or reserve officer. So as a result of that, we've seen staff dwindling. In a few weeks will be the first round of police officers, reserve officers being decertified by the state. Years back, we would hire roughly 8 to 10 summer reserve officers for May through September. And then that's kind of gone down to between 4 to 6. And now I'm down to just 2. And in 2023, it'll be down to 0. So to be proactive, and I may be a year too late, I may have probably this should have come up last year. is a request for additional staffing of 2 full-time police officers. And I also want to just note that I was promoted to lieutenant in 2011, chief in 2019, so roughly about 11 years in an administrative position. And during that time, I would say we've been lucky to be fully staffed for about a 1-year period throughout that 11 years, just through retirements, officers leaving to other departments or off Cape, and or an injury. So it's very hampering when a department our size loses staff, and it takes roughly 12 to 18 months to replace an officer once they leave. It took me 7 months to just hire 3 openings we had since last July 1, and that was through 1 retirement and 2 officers leaving. So it just seems like we're always playing catch up here. And with the reserve program being eliminated, that was kind of our backstop or crutch that we could utilize those officers to augment our full-time staffing. So that's the request that's before town meeting this year.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for Chief Early?
I'm sorry, Dan, if I could also real quick, that this is not going to be a multi-year approach to this. I do believe that increasing the staffing by a few officers and working with some scheduling and hoping to stay fully staffed. Again, I can't say 100%, but the plan is not 2 this year, 2 next year, 2 the year after. There's no intention to try to recapture all of the part-time people we used to have, but to be able to fulfill the calls we're handling today, the length of the calls, the type of the calls, and our shoulder season expanding, the popularity of our beaches. To be bluntly honest, having a couple of police officers on shift in the summer is just not, it's not working. So I just wanted to add that in. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mike?
Just had a question for the chief. How often there is less than 2 officers on a shift now?
Right now, we're year-round staffing 2 officers. That happened in 2020 when the pandemic began because our calls were just off the charts. Prior to that, during certain parts of the off-season, we would run just 1 officer on a shift. And as you can imagine, there's a whole host of problems with that, never mind from a safety standpoint. But again, the type of calls we're encountering, the mental health issues the department is up against, they're time consuming, trips to the hospital, in custody arrests. They're just time consuming. They could take 3/4 to half of a shift to deal with.
So is that 2 officers to a shift, and that will be the same in the summer most of the time because we don't have reserve officers anymore?
Yes, and the intent would be with these additional positions, and again, fully trained and on the road, and we stay fully staffed, we really should be upping that to 3 on a shift. You get 1 event, 1 car accident. We don't have those reserves anymore that can stand by. I mean, a tow truck's everything's an hour away down our way whenever we need assistance, and having that summer reserve corps of officers freed up the full-time staff to be able to deal with more pressing matters. And now that staff will be standing by at these scenes.
Okay, thanks.
Helen?
Yeah, there's a wonderful function here on the Outer Cape, which is called mutual aid. And that, applies when there's a big fire, a big traffic accident. We get help from other communities. The only problem with that is in the summer, they have their hands full too. Chief, tell me I'm wrong. In other words, the kind of thing you could count on in the winter or, even in the shoulder seasons to maybe get mutual aid, they might have their own problems.
Yeah.
It's
that's
work.
true, Helen. Yeah, that's true.
Chief, can I ask a question? I don't get to ask questions at town meetings, so I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question here if I may. Has there any thought been given to using non-uniform personnel or non-sworn personnel for things like directing traffic at, the entrance to town hall or dealing with some of the parking stuff? Or is that not, is it too much of a liability to the town to use personnel who aren't sworn or aren't, I don't know. It's just a question.
No, I appreciate the question. And no, yeah, that has come up. Actually, a few years ago, if people remember, the bike officer downtown used to be a uniformed reserve officer with full powers of arrest. We actually transitioned to, 2 community service officers, which have no police training. They do represent the department. It's the new bike cop model we started designing, seeing this coming down the road. However, I'm very hesitant almost anywhere else throughout town for traffic control or beach issues. To be honest, people don't listen to uniformed people, never mind civilians. So it's quite a fight we're up against sometimes, but we are utilizing them. And if parking, becomes more of a prevalent thing or down the line, then yes, we can use civilian staffing for that.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Other questions for Chief Hurley on the proposal to hire 2 new police officers? Okay, Article 16, similar request from the fire department. I don't see Chief Pauly. I don't know if he's on the call or not.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Charlie Sumner. Yeah, I did get a message from Chief Pauly that he had a personal situation that created the condition that he couldn't attend tonight's meeting. He had intended to. So unfortunately, he's not here.
All right. Can you just maybe, are you familiar enough with this proposal? Are you going to?
Well, I would say that the fire chief has been working over many years to create staffing for the Wellfleet Fire Department, fire and ambulance that meets the needs of the community. So this isn't the first override that we've had to add staffing. It's happened several times in the past. So, I remember, when I worked in Brewster for a long time, and when I got to Brewster in 1986, we had 50 call people and 2 full-time people. And I'm sure the Wellfleet was a similar situation, but conditions have changed relative to the availability of call people. A lot of it has to do with, the rigorous training that's necessary. And of course, the need for paramedics is paramount, particularly as we get further from Cape Cod Hospital. So the town of Wellfleet has been working, religiously over many years to increase staffing. I think there's only 2 or 3 call people left in the department. And that's going to continue to decrease. So hence the need for full-time personnel to provide emergency services. I do not know the answer if this gets Chief to a position where staffing is adequate or there's going to be future needs. I don't know the answer to that.
I suspect I do know the answer, but
Yeah.
I'd rather not say, but something that we didn't say, and I'd just like to remind people that both Article 15 and Article 16 are also subject to separate override ballot questions. And this is the town, this is a practice that the town has used for a number of years. When new positions are created, it would be virtually impossible to fund those within the limits of the Prop 2.5. So the voters are asked if this is the level of service that you desire. It is made subject to a Prop 2.5 override. So those will be, I think it's questions. I should double check, but there'll be 2 more questions on the ballot for each of those. Those will be it'll be questions 3 and questions 4 respectively. Question 3 related to Article 15 and question 4 related to Article 16. Helen, you had another question?
Yeah. Wait, these are new positions, right? They're not, they're the kind of position that's existed before, but run it by me again. Does the personnel board have to vote on these two new positions, additional positions, Chief Hurley? Somebody?
I don't know the answer, Chief Early.
I mean, my understanding, this is a request for 2 additional people outside of what our budget calls for, but we're not changing the job description or anything. It's, just adding personnel to the department, as far as I know.
Yeah, I got a question earlier today about whether or not our personnel board was fully, filled, whether there were vacancies on it. But that's something that we should probably look at because the charter says, that's what they do. Thank you. I guess town council could answer that.
Mike DeVesto?
Yeah, when this is, when this has come up before, this doesn't have to go to the personnel board because it's not a new position. It's a position, it's adding to a position that already exists, which is a police officer.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of trying to remember. Not sure about that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Mike. All right, Article 17, the paramedic training program. Relatively self-explanatory. The concept here is to reimburse the medics for some of the cost of their training. It's pretty pricey to get the training to become a paramedic, and I believe that the way that the fire department structures this is if the paramedic, a paramedic who is in training receives money from the town, that there's a commitment to give back to the town a certain number of years of service. It's kind of a declining amount that if that paramedic leaves the town service before a certain period of time, a certain amount is owed back to the town by that individual. Am I correct on that, Charlie? Is that the way this is structured?
Yeah, that is true. I don't, off the top of my head, know the detail and the time frame, but there is language in the contract for that purpose.
Right. I believe this. Have we funded this in the past, or is this? I'm not sure whether this. I know that there was some talk about doing this in the past, but this may be new. But again, this is a transfer from their ambulance receipts.
Yeah.
Rather than new expenditures. All right, fire engine replacement. Chief Pauley's not here, but I know, Charlie, I know you've been working with him pretty closely on this. Can you speak to it?
And I'm sorry, I just got distracted. Which one are we on, Dan?
The fire engine replacement, Article 18.
Oh, yes. So this is to replace an existing piece of apparatus that is well past its life span. Now, when you look at the article, the chief is requesting the sum of $800,000. We have taken a look at the ambulance fund, and when you see the motion on June 11th, we do have some money in the ambulance fund that we could use. So we're going to recommend that we transfer $100,000 out of the ambulance fund and borrow $700,000. And the goal would be that the funds and then we would either lease purchase or borrow that $700,000 over a several year period. The cost to pay for the future borrowing obligation would also come from the ambulance fund. Won't be a raise and appropriate. It's not an override on the ballot question for a levy limit increase.
Thank you, Charlie. Further questions on this one? Yes, Manny Smith. You got to learn how to use that raise the hand button, Manny. Go ahead. You're still muted. Give it a second. No.
You're okay.
There you go.
I don't have a raise the hand button on my. Oh, I do. I have a reactions. Okay. What is this the net cost of a new piece of equipment minus a trade-in or a sale of a used vehicle? I haven't shopped for fire engines lately, so I don't know if 800,000 is gross or net, but are we getting anything for the existing piece of apparatus?
I will tell you from my experiences that used fire engines have very, very little resale or trade-in value. Sometimes the town can sometimes get something for them, but not anywhere near what you think part of the problem is that once engines are, I'm putting on my ex-fire chief hat here, maybe stepping outside my moderator role a little bit, but once fire engines are past a certain age, they no longer meet NFPA certification. So, you know, maybe they can get, you know, sent to a third world country, or you get used by a private fire department in an industrial setting or something like that. But they do not have a lot of resale or trade-in value once they're past a certain age. And Wellfleet keeps its engines, you know, many years. So.
So the cost, I'm sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
I was going to say, so this is the gross cost for a piece of equipment. And I would say too, is that when you do go out to bid and order new apparatus, it takes quite a bit of time for that unit to be constructed once the order is placed. So remember, we're going to be using current engine number 95 through that whole period. Once the new piece of equipment arrives and is put in place, then we'll have to go back to town meeting to get permission to sell by surplus, you know, the old piece of equipment. And, you know, typically I would say that the revenues from the sale of that whole old unit would probably go into the ambulance fund for future capital equipment. That's what I would recommend, but that'll be up to town meeting at that time.
So you don't just log into Amazon and say, I want a fire truck.
No, that's pretty specialized. Yeah. Well, you never know. The world's changing, right? So
I will say though that I believe Chief Pauly has made good use. There's a state bid process which does reduce the cost of buying some of these pieces of apparatus. I don't know if that's his intent on this one, but I will also give him credit. He found a used ladder truck for the town, which I've forgotten exactly what the number was, but I think it was under $300,000. I think it was somewhere in the mid to high 200,000s. That truck is going to need to be refurbished and brought back into shape. But even so, the net cost of that is probably going to be somewhere between a quarter and a third of what a new truck would cost. A new ladder truck of the type that he got, I think, is probably on the high side of 1.2 million at this point. So I'll give credit to Chief Pauly for finding this truck through his network of contacts. It came from the town of Wellesley, and I suggested that maybe we could just repaint the last 4 letters on the door, but he didn't go for that. So the truck is in the town's hands now, and I think it'll be in service sometime within the next 6 months or so.
Thank you.
Other questions on Article 18? Article 19 is the Harbor Flora and Fauna Survey. Comments on this, questions?
Mr. Moderator?
Sure.
So this is one of the articles that was going to be funded using free cash. So this will have to wait until the fall. So it'll be indefinitely postponed.
All right, thank you. Okay, Articles 20, 21, and 22 are more or less housekeeping articles. And we've used a consent calendar in the past to deal with these, to take one vote on these 3 together. We've actually run into some question as to whether we even need Article 20. It's been on the town meeting warrant for years. I guess there's some question as to whether we even really need to vote this, but this basically allows us to take money from the state to work on our roads. Article 21, this allows us to, we actually have the fund. So this allows us to take money from the PEG fund to fund some of our audio-visual operations. And Article 22 is a shellfish revolving fund, which we established a few years ago that the Shellfish Department uses, I think primarily for propagation. Any questions or comments on these, Helen?
Helen?
Yeah, so you said you referred to Article 20 as being kind of extraneous, but if it isn't approved, how can we keep applying for those state grants? We have to be given permission by town meeting, no?
I don't know the answer to that. And Jay, if Jay Norton's on the call, I know, or Charlie, I know we looked into this a little bit. I mean, there's no reason not to have this on here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, okay.
I think this year I'd recommend that you just go ahead and authorize it. Jay Norton did check with the Department of Revenue, and I did check with Town Council going forward. There's been a change in the authorization at the state level where town meeting action will not be required in the future. So you'll still get the money for the purposes that you've always gotten it, but town meeting isn't not a necessity going forward.
But it doesn't hurt to approve it.
Yeah, the state indicated that still half the towns are still doing it in this manner.
Okay, thank you.
Judy, you have a question?
You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks. Regarding number 22, the shellfish one, I'm just a little confused because a few weeks ago, I think it was, the Shellfish Constable appeared before the select board to ask if, I think it was something like she could go beyond that. I'm not quite sure. Can someone answer that? I think it was like 15,000 or, so I'm just wondering how the two actions relate to each other, if at all.
Is Nancy Chabetta on the call? And if not, is there somebody else that can answer this?
Dan?
You sure?
It's Charlie. So, by the way, Dan doesn't know this because I sent it to him by email today, but I like at 5 o'clock, but there's also a change in the regulatory scheme with the state is going forward. Once you've adopted a revolving fund of this nature, you only have to go back to town meeting if you increase it. But that's for the future. I just wanted Dan and Rich Waldo to know that. Now, there is a provision of the law in the course of a fiscal year. The select board has the authority to authorize a level of increase in the revolving fund. I don't know what that percentage is, but that's an action that the select board took recently.
Okay, so this was this money in the fund that the Shellfish Department came to the select board and asked for some additional money.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I did see that email, but I didn't
so
know.
it was like, I think it was 15,000 maybe. And so we're voting on this for the limit to be 50. Will people know that we've extended it another 15 already?
Well, the 15 that was extended was for fiscal year 22. This is the revolving fund for fiscal year 23, 2 separate years.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask on the 6th, you know, what the 15,000 was for. I'll review what that was for.
Okay.
Thank you, Jude. Rebecca?
I can actually tell you that the 15,000 was for the shellfish relay where they took the clams and whatnot from the Taunton River, and it was contaminated, but not to the point where it was so bad. And she explained at that meeting, they needed that extra money to buy that contaminated shellfish, bring it down to Wellfleet, disperse it throughout the harbor. The harbor was, that certain area was closed for 3 months. And what will happen is because shellfish actually filter out their own, there are their own filters. After 3 months, they will be clean shellfish and they'll be able to be harvested.
Okay,
That was what that money was for, to buy that.
All right, she has a lot of money for that kind of stuff, so I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jude. Thank you, Rebecca, for answering that. Any other questions on these three articles, which again will be handled as a consent calendar? And just so people know, when we take articles as a group, it's for the efficiency of not having to take an individual vote, but it doesn't mean that we can't ask questions. Voters are perfectly entitled to ask questions, engage in debate and so forth. And if for some reason somebody doesn't want something included in the consent calendar, we can take an individual vote on that. You'll see some other consent calendars later, but for things which tend to be relatively non-controversial, it's a way of streamlining a little bit of the action at town meeting. So. Article 23, I'm sorry, am I in the right place here? Yes, Article 23 is for the elementary school fire suppression system. Charlie, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I will only say that the current school does not have the required building fire suppression system. And they're in a situation from a regulatory scheme for, building and life safety where this is, is required and necessary and important. Now, this would be a borrowing for $2.2 million. It is included on the June 21st a special town election as a debt exclusion. And we would be borrowing this money for a period of time. I estimated for a 20-year period. And the cost to a homeowner with a median house value of $619,000 would be $41. Now, a debt exclusion is such as once the obligation is paid off, like your mortgage, that taxing authority goes away.
Again, the difference between an override and a debt exclusion is an override is a permanent elevation of the levy limit, and a debt exclusion is a elevation of the levy limit only for the life of the debt and only for the debt service. All right. Any other questions on the fire suppression system? Deb Felix?
Yeah, this may seem silly, but is there any way to get a waiver for that, given that they're right next door to the fire department?
The answer is no.
Okay.
And I will say it's probably the most valuable piece of real estate in the town. And it should have had a fire suppression many years ago when it was built, but I can talk to you about that offline sometime.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? All right, Article 34. This is supplemental funding. I believe the bids for the fuel tanks at the Marina came in quite a bit higher than was budgeted for at prior town meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct. We went out to bid this past winter. I think the original authorization for this project was back in April of 2019. It had to go back to town meeting for an amendment, I believe, in 21. Anyway, when we went out to bid, I don't need to tell people what the bidding and construction climate is, but the cost came in much higher than the original appropriation. The only way we can carry this project out is to get more money from town meeting, which is the purpose of this article. And the debt for this project would be paid for through the Marina Enterprise Fund.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Okay. Just a curiosity, the intent of these fuel tanks is not just for fuel for the Marina, but it'll fuel the town vehicles as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think right now the town is going out of town to buy its fuel in Eastham.
Yeah. And we should thank the town of Eastham. We have an intermunicipal agreement. They have been allowing us to use their fueling facilities.
All right, Keller's Corner Engineering, a brief explanation on this. For those who, let me just say, for those who maybe a little bit newer to town and don't know where Keller's Corner is, if you go down Mayo Beach, the very sharp turn as you head west on in front of Mayo Beach is what referred to as Keller's Corner.
Dan, I can speak to that.
Sure thing. Go ahead, Jay.
So Keller's Corner, this has been kind of deferred for a few years. It's been in front of town meeting at least once that I believe. The basis of this request, there's an erosion problem happening at a pretty high rate there. And we're afraid that it's going to undermine the road at some point and affect the infrastructure of that roadway. So this request will provide some engineering services and design to implement some type of shorefront stabilization there, as well as some drainage solutions. The good thing is we did reach out to some grant funding, and we just heard from NRCS that we did acquire a grant for this project in the amount close to $300,000. So this appropriation will act as the town match for that grant funding. So definitely some good news there.
Thank you, Jay.
And Dan, Mr. Moderator, if I could just add a little bit here. The only little subplot, I guess, is that this is one of the ones that was going to be funded by free cash. We don't have free cash available, so this one, maybe I forgot to talk to Jay about this, but this one will have to be indefinitely postponed until the fall. But I do think the good news is we do have some funding from NRCS that includes some engineering, if I'm not mistaken. So, hopefully we can at least start the project and wait till we get to the fall. And that's a recent development. Sorry, Jay.
Yep, no, that's fine. They do provide up to 25% design, so we can definitely wait till the fall for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Jude, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment. I think that's good because when I asked Conscom and Shellfish if they had known about this and how it might affect, the sand that we've been hearing about, they hadn't discussed it. So I expect they should.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So just to reiterate this, the intent is to indefinitely postpone this on June 11th. Okay. Article 26, this is to do some survey work. This is a place on Lieutenant Island. It's used for access for shell fishing. Charlie?
Yes. So once again, the Rights of Public Access Committee has been working on a number of projects throughout the community to ensure public access. This is one of the priority areas. There is a concern about the current location of the layout of the road. They're requesting $3,200 to hire in some engineering services to do some survey work out there to define exactly where that road is.
Okay, any questions or comments on this proposal? All right, the next series of articles of the committee.
I have a question on this.
sorry,
Ben. Is this a road on public property or is this a road on Audubon property?
It's not Audubon. Am I correct?
I don't know if someone else can speak with a little more authority, but I believe that's the question is, Audubon property is located abutting this area, I believe. And we really need to define exactly where that road is relative to the different property lines.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of the survey is to find out whose property the road is on. I think right now, no one is quite certain.
Yeah, and I do know someone from the Rights of Public Access Committee will be at town meeting to speak on this article and provide more information.
Yeah, is there anyone from that committee on this meeting tonight that could answer that? I don't see a hand, so. Okay. All right, so the next series of articles, Article 27 through Article 34, are all the community preservation articles, the administrative expenses, and the various funding requests or funding proposals from the Community Preservation Fund. And none of these involve any new tax revenue. These are all funded by the 3% surcharge that's added to the property tax under the Community Preservation Act. In general, these have been non-controversial, so that I'm proposing that we take these as a consent calendar. Again, the opportunity will be there for questions or explanations as necessary. Are there any questions right now on the various community preservation articles, or anyone would like to comment on any of these? Okay, I don't see any hands. All right. A disposition of town property. This involves transferring some property for conservation purposes. Is this from the Open Space Committee? Is there anyone from the Open Space Committee or anyone that would like to comment on this? Any questions? Okay. Affordable Housing Trust Bylaw. My understanding is this is a housekeeping article that we passed this in prior town meeting, 2021 town meeting, but apparently there were some typographical errors, so that this article is to correct those and bring this bring the wording of the article in conformity with state law. Questions or comments on this one? Okay, Article 37 is to establish a special detail account for the fire department. My understanding is that the purpose of this is that if the fire department personnel are used on a private detail, right now they have to wait until to get paid until the town collects from whoever the private party is that's using the detail. I believe that under, I don't know if it's state labor law, but they're supposed to get paid in a timely fashion. The police department has a similar detail account. So this basically salts that account with a small sum of money so that the personnel can get paid in a timely fashion, and then the town will collect the revenue from the whichever party went out and hired the detail. Have I got that right?
That was so much better than I could have done.
You keep saying that. I'm not sure that's really true, but easement for the Herring River Restoration project. On this one, I'm not even going to try to talk. I'm sorry, Jude. Did you have a question on the last one?
Sorry, yeah, sorry, just quickly. Does the town have problems getting this revenue, or?
I don't think they normally do. I think sometimes it just takes a little longer. Not everyone's billing cycle or payment cycle matches the town's payroll cycle. So I don't.
Okay, and it doesn't include things like, Oyster Fest and big things like that?
Well, it would if SPAT was paying a detail. I think SPAT does pay for the private details to the fire department.
They do, and police, and I've wanted to know what those amounts are, so I'll follow up with that.
Okay, I don't think those amounts are in the town's budget. It would be in SPAT's budget.
Right, but when they appeared before the town, I was trying to find out what they actually paid our police and fire for Oyster Fest, and I wasn't allowed in that meeting, so I'll ask again.
Okay. Helen, you got a question? Is this a question on 37? You're muted, Helen.
Sorry, I'm so careful, so you don't have to listen to the dogs and cats here. The ADU article, that's just a housekeeping article that you just described very well. What number is that?
I'm sorry, that's this is not the ADU. It's Article 36. It's the Affordable Housing Trust.
Oh,
Not
right.
the ADU bylaw.
Yeah. So is that housekeeping for the Affordable Housing Trust? excuse me, the ADU, is that going to be bumped to special town meeting?
I don't know the answer to that.
Remember, there were a few things that, you know, one of the building inspectors, one of our many building inspectors thought should be changed. It was, you know, there were a couple of words put in there. Is that going to special town meeting now?
I believe that was pulled off the warrant for the special town meeting.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Sorry.
Yeah, just for everyone's information, in crafting this warrant initially, it was a rather lengthy warrant, as Wellfleets tend to be. And in talking with the select board, I made the suggestion, I think Charlie also made the suggestion that the Springtown meeting be focused on financial matters, and that zoning and bylaw issues, to the extent possible, could be handled in a special town meeting in the fall. This is something I think would be a good practice for the town going forward as a general rule, because I think it would allow us to take care of the financial matters in a one session town meeting, and we would then have a regularly scheduled fall town meeting for the voters to expect. But that's ultimately up to the select board to do. But that is in essence how the warrant was divided this year, is that the bulk of the zoning bylaw changes have been put off till the fall town meeting, along with some other bylaw matters. So the easement for the Herring River restoration, and this is one I know that I have absolutely unqualified to talk about. So is there someone that can explain what this is for? Charlie?
This particular article would authorize the town to accept, and this really what will be gifts for temporary and permanent temporary construction easements and permanent eminent domain takings of land relative to the Herring River restoration project. And there's a series of low-lying roads that need to be elevated as part of that project. And we do need to take some small permanent and temporary easements to carry out that project.
Okay, and I had a question from John Portnoy earlier that he was asking why section B was in there when apparently there is not going to be any money requested from the town, so that when the motion is made, section B will be deleted. This does not involve any expenditure of town funding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Questions or comments on Article 38? Okay, Article 39 is to rescind debt authorizations when the town borrows money. If it doesn't use all the money that was authorized, the town needs to formally basically give up its ability to borrow that money. This helps our bond rating if we don't have a lot of debt authorization that we're not using. So this represents a number of projects that the town borrowed money for. It didn't use all the money that it borrowed or that it was authorized to borrow. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the only thing I would like to tell people that when the motion is read on town meeting floor, the third item, DPW facilities, town hall furnace, in the amount of $75,000 will be deleted from this request. We just need to do a little bit more research on that particular item. Once we resolve that, we'll, I'd recommend the town bring that last remaining item back to town meeting in the fall, but we have a little more work to do on that.
All right, Jude, you have a question?
Yeah, just about, I think that Hilda, $1 million of that is there. Is that because we just authorized to vote for 2 million, or did we actually borrow 2 million and then get reimbursed by Helen donation?
Yeah, we just borrowed $1 million. The
okay, so it's
second
just
$1 million
having that.
while authorized wasn't borrowed.
Got it. Thanks.
I think that's true for most of these. It was authorized but not actually borrowed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. If it had been borrowed and not used, would it have then ultimately ended up in free cash or?
Well, well, maybe that's for another day, but
Okay.
that gets cumbersome. So.
But
maybe
the reality is the town should not have a lot of debt authorization that it's not using, correct?
Yeah, the reality too is if we did do that, and frankly, we've done that in a few cases, then it can never end up in free cash. We would have to use it for a future like project, a project that could be borrowed for the same time frame as this was borrowed, but we don't have too much of that, just a little. So.
This is the kind of discussion that only municipal finance geeks enjoy, and the rest of the voting body is probably probably their eyes are glazing over at this point. So
this is one of the reasons I retired. I couldn't take it anymore.
You thought you retired, right? Article 40 involves some authorizations associated with the Main Street intersection project. Jay, are you the most qualified to talk about this? Or Jay Norton?
Sure, thank you, Dan. So similar to how Charlie described the Herring River Restoration Project, this is very similar. It's just authorizing the town to accept easements that will be permanent or temporary easements, mostly along the town-owned property along Main Street, which has been a part of this project since the inception, back in 2013. So this just gives the ability of the town to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of portions of town-owned property for this project.
Okay. Is there any funding that's involved with this?
Not at this point. That will have to come at a later date. This is basically to enter, the appraisal process of the takings and permanent and temporary easements.
So approving this doesn't involve an immediate expenditure of any funding.
No.
Right. Okay. Was there some talk about taking one of those phrases out, Charlie, or is that not the case? I got that wrong. I might be confusing two articles.
Well, this is not one of the ones that we did chat with town council about, but now that you've asked that question, I should double check.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just wondering, where similar to the other one, should that subparagraph C still be in there or not?
Yeah, I will call council tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to mess up your day. Okay, Article 41. This is I think it was a petition from residents, but I think the select board had agreed to put it on. I believe there's a part of is it East Commercial Street? I think that they're looking to lower the speed limit. Is that correct?
I forget. I wonder if one of the select board members would remember.
I believe it's East Commercial Street, perhaps from the Mike, Chief Hurley. Do you know the answer?
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I know Jay's here too.
It is
the
East
actual
Commercial Street.
Yeah, the actual petition came from residents of East Commercial, but my understanding, this would give us some leeway, I believe, Jay, through other roads in town also.
It would, yeah, Main Street as well.
I know that one of the residents on East Commercial has a little sign posted, which is absolutely the favorite sign I've seen in many years, which says "Deaf dog with a death wish." It says "Slow, deaf dog with death wish," which makes me smile every time I drive by it. I think it's wonderful. Article 42 is a zoning bylaw change, and I know I said a few minutes ago that most of the zoning articles were put off until the fall town meeting, but my understanding is that the planning board had their meeting on this bylaw change back a number of months ago, and there is a clock that starts ticking once the planning board has held a hearing, so that's why I think we would have run out the clock had this gone to the fall town meeting. So I believe that's why this is still on this warrant as opposed to waiting for the fall. Is there someone from the planning board that wishes to speak to this, or Charlie? Or one of the members of the select board?
I don't do zoning, but I think Rebecca Ruffley is maybe on this meeting.
She is. Rebecca, do you want to try to tackle this? I see her name. Give it another minute. Is there?
Sorry, I'm here. I went into the other room quick. I apologize. Can you repeat
Yeah, I
that?
can do that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we're talking about, can you enlighten us as to Article 42? Maybe just explain a little bit. This is the zoning
Yeah, can you tell
bylaw
me?
related to contractors' yards. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's the planning board already had their public hearing on that, so that couldn't be delayed until the fall because there's a 120-day time period.
Okay.
Do you want me to talk about the article itself or just the
Yeah,
fact
maybe just
that it's on the meeting?
Yeah, just a quick explanation of what the effect of this would be.
So this is the contractor's yard, right?
Correct.
So I didn't attend the actual meetings for it, but I know that they had a couple public hearings. One was to have it by special permit and one was to have them not allowed. And they ended up voting to have them not be allowed at all. So that inevitably started the clock and here we are.
Helen?
Helen? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm unmuted, believe it or not. I went to at least, I think, the final meeting, and the reasoning was sound. And it had to do with a sense, well, Jan Morris is here. She can speak to it better than I can. But my take on it, having been on the planning board, was there was a sound discussion, a careful discussion about that kind of activity in those districts, and that it should be outlawed. It should be prohibited. That was the punchline, but it wasn't like kind of slam dunk. It was talked about carefully. But
Jan?
call on Jan, please.
Yes, Jan?
Actually, I can't speak to it because I'm no longer on the planning board. I'm on the zoning board. But my question, Dan, is I'm wondering if anyone from the bylaw committee is here tonight, because I'd like to know why they voted 0-3 against it, against the bylaw change.
Against the bylaw change. I don't know if there's anyone from the bylaw committee on the call. I don't think so, but that's a question that you absolutely can ask them at town meeting. No, I'm sorry, I don't believe that there's anybody from the bylaw committee on the call tonight. Mike DeBesto? You got it, Mike, you have to unmute. We're not hearing, there you go.
Yeah, I hear, yeah, I got you. There was something Helen left out about the discussion and the purpose of this. Is there's another provision in our bylaws that allow a contractor's yard through a special permit already. So the feeling was that there shouldn't be the reason why this was on here is the planning board discussed that there shouldn't be a by right contractor's yard, but that anything would have to be permitted through the normal permits of the normal special permitting process through the ZBA with the conditions that are laid out in the other zoning bylaw, which I'm sure they'll discuss at town meeting. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Other questions or comments on Article 42? Okay, Article 43 is a citizen's petition. It's a non-binding public advisory committee question rather related to the Pilgrim Power Plant. Candace Perry?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just have one question. If this is passed at the town meeting, it doesn't then go on to the 21st to be voted on again, correct?
The public advisory question petition?
Right.
No, this
Okay.
is town meeting action, not a ballot question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments on Article 43?
That's all I
Article
needed.
40, I'm sorry. Can I miss somebody?
I'm sorry,
Article-
thank you.
No, you're welcome. Article 44, the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund. Somebody like to explain this briefly? Ryan, do you want to, would you like to speak to this?
There, I got it.
Ryan, are you muted? Are you intending to talk about Article 44?
So this is the nuclear,
No, we're talking about the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund. I'm sorry.
oh, okay. So, sure, the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, so, basically this would be restricted to being used for, to support housing with, for AMI of 80% or lower. And the funding sources are basically the community impact fees that we're proposing for town meeting. And by law, 35% of those either have to be used for affordable housing or infrastructure. So this one and the following article basically establishes two stabilization funds that dedicate the use of these funds, even if both of them are not adopted. The funds, if they are adopted, would go into these stabilization funds. I don't know.
So yeah, Mike, if I understand this correctly, the first one, the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund, would create a fund to support housing that was income restricted, whereas the second one, the Article 45, would establish a fund that the town could use to support housing initiatives with fewer restrictions on income limits. Is that correct?
Yes, and you know that they're both subject to town meeting approval. So they would have to go back to town meeting for the voters to decide where to allocate those funds. So yeah, the voters would still be able to weigh their options at that point.
Right, so this would establish the fund, but then any taking money out of those funds for a specific project would come back to town meeting, correct?
Yes, they're special purpose funds.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments on this? And then the Article 46 and 47, I assume, are two funding mechanisms to start putting money in those funds. Is that correct?
Yes, there are community impact fees on certain classes of short-term rentals. They do not apply to all short-term rentals, and that's governed by statute. It's not a choice the town can really make in terms of defining what properties these options apply to. 3% is the maximum allowable by law, which is what we're proposing. And you know, it creates some funding. It's going to be relatively modest. It's not going to be game changing, but at least creates some funding that we can dedicate to housing today, or effectively as of a town meeting.
And then that's true of both of these fee structures, right?
Yes, and they're not compounding, so they don't. Each one applies to a specific class of housing, so they're not getting, you know, two tax rates of 3% each. They're getting, you know, 3% for a certain class and 3% for another class. They are primarily aimed at investment-owned properties, or yeah, I don't know. And that basically requires that two or more properties be operated by the same operator within the same town. Rental agents do not qualify as operators, just to be clear on that. And then so Article 45 is on single-family homes. And Article 46 is on multifamily units.
Yeah, I think it's 46 and 47 at this point.
Yep.
I think it
Okay.
was 45 and 46 once upon a time, but
All right.
Mike DeVasto?
Yeah, just to be clear, the tax is actually imposed on the user or the renter in that scenario, not on the actual owner. So it's paid through the same pay structure as a regular short-term rental tax. It would be collected at that time from the user. And just, I think that's just important that people know that fact, and that I guess that's all I really had to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'd actually add one last thing, is that the town is not the responsible party for collecting these. They're collected by the Department of Revenue. And then they're sent to the town as remittances, essentially. So there is an administrative burden placed on the town for collecting these fees.
Okay. Just a question, looking, and Charlie, maybe you can answer this, looking at the two stabilization funds, the 46 and Article 46 and Article 47 are setting up funding mechanisms to put money into those funds. Once those funds are established, if the town in the future chooses to, can it add other revenues or other monies into those stabilization funds if it desires to, you know, support those to a greater degree than is funded by the 3% tax?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, it's treated just like any other stabilization fund at that
Yeah.
point. Okay, I'm not saying that's something the town will necessarily want to do, but once those funds are created, there's a repository for those kinds of monies.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on articles? I guess it would be 44 through 47. Those are all. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. Go
I
ahead.
actually just had a question for Ryan. There's a reason why this is done and not just putting the funding directly into the Affordable Housing Trust. And I can't quite remember what it is, but I think it's probably good for clarification purposes.
So town council, so the Department of Revenue requires them to be appropriated by town meeting. And so that requires them going into a special purpose fund. So if that answers the question.
It does. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments on these four articles? Okay, I think the select board should be prepared you know, they're a little complicated, so I think the select board should be prepared with a clear explanation for these, you know, as much as possible. Article 48 is a petitioned article, I believe. Harriet Arnoldi, is this your petitioned article?
Yes, and I really related to the metaphor you just used a little while ago about the ticking clock, because that's really a lot what's behind this. I reached out, I think I sent an emails this morning to both you and to the board members about trying to get whatever people's objections to this were. The ticking clock was a sort of a combined thing of the release of the IPCC report for 2022 about climate, which, you know, reiterated and underscored that we're now in this 8-year best case scenario grace period where what we do might actually make life a little bit easier for our grandchildren and et cetera. And so that sense of urgency about climate and the importance of trees as something that we don't have to invent or pay for, but that we're lucky to have. And the other part of the ticking clock was that because we didn't know for sure the town meeting was going to get postponed for a couple of months, the deadline for submitting, you know, petitioned articles was coming up very, very fast. So I reached out to people in town, you know, town hall, and wasn't really able to get advice doing, you know, putting together the article. I talked to Rich Nadler, who submitted a very similar article, and he lent me the wording of his article in Orleans, which was universally supported by the select board and which I believe did pass the Orleans town meeting. And there were some adaptations and changes, but I figured since it was a non-binding article and the idea was to get a group of serious people together working with the relevant committees to prepare a binding article, that it would be okay if it wasn't so perfect because it's non-binding and it was up to adjustment. The only thing it would really do would be to prepare, to get a group to set out, the changes. But if anyone has suggestions for how, I was, surprised because I'd had a lot of positive feedback to see that nobody, not one member of either the Board of Selectmen or the bylaw committee recommended passage of this article. So now I'm thinking that anything's better than nothing, and moving ahead is something that I think is important.
Well, let me, Harriet, I mean, if there are changes that you would like to make to the wording of the article, the motion does not need to be exactly verbatim the way the article is written, as long as it falls within the scope. So if between now and next Saturday, you want to draft a motion that perhaps changes some words in this, as long as it's within the scope, and I'd be more than happy to review anything that you come up with.
Well,
it's not necessary that it be verbatim with this, but
yeah, it's more that I need some guidance in terms of getting any changes, whatever was objected to, of getting those changes to, so I need some support from the people who voted not to agree to it. And I did reach out. I've been talking to people in the state government. I've been talking to Margaret Murphy in Provincetown, who, lawyer who worked on their tree stuff. It takes it a step further in the wording deliberately to get people to think about it, since it's not binding, about not just looking at shade trees are nice and aesthetic, but looking at, just at the time when we're losing trees, not just on the West Coast disastrously, but also trees around town in ways that are upset.
If I can, I've said that, the purpose of this is informational more than advocacy. So
Yeah.
I think people looking at this understand what your intent is.
Well, hopefully I'll get some feedback from the board or from the committee.
Okay, Helen, and then I think Candace was next, and then Mike and Helen.
Quick question about, so am I wrong in thinking that if it's a petitioned article, only the petitioner can offer an amendment, or once it gets on town meeting floor, anybody can offer an amendment, correct? Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And the second thing I wanted to say is, as a consciousness raising non-binding article, I think it's excellent. The only reason I voted against it is I'm very much against another committee forming, appointed by the town to do something which really I think should be addressed by Conscom, by planning board, and particularly because when you plant trees, replacement trees, they have to be irrigated for at least 3 years or more. And the use of water to replace a tree is ridiculous, in my opinion, when you have matured trees that could simply be left in place and planned around. So this was something that wasn't really dealt with in it, but it was mainly the committee. That's the only reason I voted against it. And thank you, Harriet, for bringing it to the town's attention.
Okay, Candace, I think you're next.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Harriet for doing this, and also to ask if anybody on the call, anyone else on the select board, would tell us why they voted against it. Thank you.
Mike?
Well, I don't want to get into the merits of it because as Danny asked us not to do that as part of this pre-town meeting, I'm happy to do that on town meeting floor. And I'm happy to give Harriet my phone number and talk with her personally about it. So I'll send you my number, Harriet. I got your email earlier. But I'll spare Danny the back and forth right now.
Thank you. I think, you know, we're at about 9:30 and we're pretty close to the end here. So, Tim, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, I do. I just want to point out two things and they don't have to answer them tonight. It says that the tree preservation bylaw apply to trees that are 6 inches in diameter or greater and located within a lot's 25-foot setback area. What will be the portion for non-conforming houses that don't have the 25-foot setback? They need to take a look at that. And then it also says that if it's not practical to save a protected tree, they need to make a listing of what protected trees are so that we're aware of what those trees would be. I'm not against the whole thing. I just would like to know the answers to those, but it doesn't have to happen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Jan or John?
It's Jan. I just have two comments. I don't need a response from Harriet. First of all, 25-foot setback does not apply across every zoning district. They vary. And I was puzzled by why a member of the Wellfleet zoning board would be included in the tree preservation bylaw committee, because we on the zoning board adjudicate bylaws, the planning board drafts them. So I just wanted to comment that.
Thank you, Jan. All right, any further questions or comments on this? We can move along. All right, and again, Harriet, if you need some help, you know, as to what would be allowed, if you want to bring this up with amended language, it'd be helpful to check with me ahead of time to make sure it's within the scope.
Thanks, and I'd be grateful for any suggestions. Like I said, it's non-binding and it's adjustable.
Yeah, okay. The last part of the warrant are the standard annual articles. I don't think we really need to say much about these. This allows the town to dispose of surplus property. I believe that the motion will include a list of 3 or 4 items, maybe not even that money. We want to allow the town collector to collect taxes. That's how we pay for our bills. The liability indemnification is something that we do every year, which basically says that we're going to not sue the town, sue the state if they work on some of our town roads and things. I'm sorry, the tidal streams. And the Nauset School assessment formula we vote on every year. This is greatly to the town's benefit because the assessment formula that the 4 towns agreed to means that our Nauset assessment is based on a population that we're sending to the school. It's a capitation rather than a funding formula that the state would use, which would disadvantage a town with fewer students in the school. So that's something that we vote on every year, and it's a good thing that 4 towns agree to this. Charlie, coming from Brewster, I'm always surprised that Brewster agrees to this because I think it disadvantages Brewster to Wellfleet's advantage, but well, maybe don't tell them.
We love our member communities, so.
You love your member communities, yes. I know. All right, that's all I have. If there aren't any final comments, thank you for all being patient. And Dick, again, thank you to the forum for sponsoring this. Once again, for anyone who may have come in late, the select board will be, the forum will be hosting another meeting with the select board on Monday night. Is that at 6:30 rather than at 7?
Yes, it's 6:30 rather than 7.
6:30, and I assume that the information about that will be posted on the town website if it hasn't been already.
Town website and the forum website.
And the
right?
forum
Either one.
website. Okay.
Both.
Kathleen, I'm sorry. Kathleen?
Yeah, Danny, thank you. I want to thank you. You do this every year for us and you do a great job. And thank you very much, Danny. Mr. Moderator, you're the best.
It's that $225, Kathleen. It makes it all worth it. Mike?
Good night, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, Mike, did you have anything you need?
Yeah, is the forum on the 6th, is that a hybrid meeting, in-person hybrid?
Yes, It's both at the council, the adults center. Someone called it
I
the
think we can
adult
still call
center.
it
and that's-
COA. Yeah.
Just,
The COA, it's not. It's
given
the
the,
Senior
given-
Center, COA/Adult Community Center. Take
yeah,
your
I
pick.
just, Dick, the question I guess I have is that given the complexity of the hybrid setup, do we know that we have the correct personnel and who are going to be able to manage that meeting?
The town has said that their specialists will help
Okay,
set it up. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I think they really,
yes.
even though it's the forum's auspices, I think the town really needs to kind of be running that meeting.
So,
Ryan?
yes, I have spoken to the contractors about it.
Okay, good. All right, that's it. Thank you all. Have a good night, and I will, those of you interested, I'll see you on Monday night. And for everyone else, again, look forward to town meeting on the 11th.
Thanks again, Deli.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.